In 1983, a team of deeply Ponus scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any of the senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the five senses could cloud our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him all of his senses, the scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensatory nerve connected to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not feel, see, hear, or taste, with no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world. He was alone with his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke out loud about his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear himself. After 4 days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was onset of psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concerns. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but were not convinced until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientist. He repeated personal information that the scientists only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased through his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying the voices were overwhelming. In every waking moment, his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself at the wall, trying to elicit a pain response. He begged the scientists for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and clawed his non-functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. The hysterical subject now said that the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At one point, he yelled, "No heaven, no forgiveness," for 5 hours straight. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God. After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite chunks off his flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so he could not kill himself. After a few hours being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had to be manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head and, despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with the scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God, and He has abandoned us." And his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death. Another classic off the list, but is it good though? Let's talk about it. Now, Gateway to the Mind is one of the more classic creepypastas, and it's one of the more shorter ones. I'm actually a bit surprised, because I could have sworn it was a longer story before, but no, it's actually relatively short. On the website, it's 2 minutes, judging from the video, I read it in 4, so yeah, take that with what you will. But one interesting about this story is that there is a video that goes along with it, and a lot of people tie to this video. And it's basically of a guy in a room throwing mud on himself, I think at one point wire and hair, doing a bit of research. So on the origin of the video, it's basically part of an artist's project or something where he just gets on camera and does a bunch of crazy shit with, I guess, items. I don't remember too much of it, but I'm pretty sure that's the origin. The video that is shown with the story is in black and white, but the original video is in color, so you can, I guess if you want to watch the video in color, there is that. But yeah, the video itself isn't that creepy. It was before, but looking at it now through the eyes of an adult, it's not that creepy. So yeah, it's a cool video, but it doesn't hold up as well. Now, as for the story itself, it does relatively hold up because it is, again, a short little campfire story that you sort of tell to your friends around, around Halloween night or in a campfire, like I said. There isn't too much to go off of. The idea that, you could sense God through removing your five senses is an interesting concept. I don't think it's ever really been done in a movie before, from what I recall. Let me know if there is a movie that does a concept like that, and I might check it out, and who knows, maybe I'll review it. But I digress. And yeah, there's not too much to speculate on this story, other than the fact that, how did this, I guess, experiment got out? Who was behind the experiment? Was it a government? Was it a rogue faction of the government? Or was it just people who were within the government that all came together and just did the experiment? And if so, how was this funded? There's a lot of, I guess, questions about that. And also, notice how the story said the last test subject to volunteer, meaning this is not the first time. This is the first successful one, but it could be indication that there was other test subjects who tried to do it, who did the experiment and were not volunteers. So that's little food for thought right there. But yeah, there's not much to go off of. The story itself was pretty good. It kept it short. It told its story from point A to point B. Yeah, not much to it other than the fact that I recommend checking out this story. This story is pretty cool, and yeah, not much to it. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to check out my other videos. Social medias will be linked in the description along with the original story. And with that being said, I am out.